Zach, Tim, thank you so much for joining. Sometimes we have different, varied conversations in the podcast. This I kind of want to refer to as Inside the Advertiser Studio, where we actually go through a campaign specifically. Either one of you can start, but just kind of talk me through the genesis, maybe the partnership, and kind of how it got to. We'll get to how it got to fruition, but maybe where it started.
You want me to kick off, Zach?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Yeah, we have been together now, 72andSunny in the NFL. Wow, getting close to 6 years now. That's when I came to the NFL and we began to work together. And we saw this real opportunity to put a more human, authentic, and really a more inclusive approach to the NFL, right? So we wanted to have a more compassionate voice out there. We wanted to have a more open, transparent, and make football just more accessible and more inclusive. And so a big part of that was what we just simply coined the helmets off strategy, meaning that we're just going to take the helmets off the players and, almost in everything that we do except for highlight films, and, get behind the players and what they cared about and what they stood for. Right. And in doing so, and of course, a lot of that had to do with the fact that we knew fans, their favorite thing, of course, were the players and the clubs. Right. So that was that was essentially giving our fans what they wanted. But it also helped us, I think, humanize the brand and allowed ourselves to do a lot of things that maybe we hadn't been able to do before. So this whole strategy, which again started many years back, has every year has had this big moment at the Super Bowl. So all year long, we create this sense of momentum of the season, and last year was really truly historic. And then on our biggest stage of the year, we always choose to focus on something that is one of the highest strategic priorities of the league, and we bring it to life in a big way. And we have done anywhere from 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minute commercials that really seek to tell you something new that you didn't know about the NFL or really surprise you. It's our biggest audience by far, obviously. Even though we pull in anywhere from 20 to 50 million people on every game throughout the year, here in the Super Bowl we'll have 200 million people. So it's an opportunity for us to really talk to a lot of our more casual fans and even some of our non-fans to sort of change their perceptions of the league.
That's awesome. And also it's interesting to think of like 90 seconds or like 2 minutes and 30 seconds as long form now, but it really is. It's a different form of storytelling. Zach, when you're getting into this, where do you start?
I have a journalism background. That's what I went to school for. So I like to take a journalistic approach to everything we do. And I think it's not about just great storytelling, but can we break a story? Tell something the world they've never seen. Last year, we did it with Deanna Flores and NFL. And really, that became a huge story after that with flag football becoming part of the Olympics. It really kickstarted a whole new way of bringing in women to the league in a whole different way. This year was about international. And we thought about this year is, again, a journalistic approach, starting to study what the league is already doing. They had a camp in Ghana, looking what OCU Manuro was doing, the way he's talking. That became direct inspiration for the film.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, sometimes you kind of have to create something out of thin air, but this is very much taking the directive from what's going on and then just like you would in PR journalism,
Sure.
You're trying to reinforce that idea through storytelling.
For sure.
So then in go ahead,
I was
Tim.
going to say a lot of this is again just sort of zeroing in on something that will intrigue and enlighten your audience about the NFL. I mean, obviously people look at the NFL and they think they know everything about us and what we stand for. And there are some who might look at us and say, "Well, why do you have to advertise? You have 200 million people who are watching your game. Like, why? Like, what is the purpose really of advertising?" And again, it's a chance to open people's minds about the NFL and to open the game, right? To open our game to people. And so we sort of have this ongoing theme of football's for everyone. And we found a lot of ways to just open up the game and really invite people in. And so, yeah, we have very, clear key strategic targets. Our acquisition targets are young people because we have to future-proof the game. And like all sports leagues and all entertainment entities, it's increasingly difficult to engage younger audiences. So that's a core focus of what we do. And then Latinos, very important. Zach talked about how last year with Diana Flores, who's the captain of the flag football team from Mexico, she was the star of our Super Bowl commercial. And so, the NFL had never focused on flag before in the Super Bowl. They'd never had a foreign national be the star of their commercial, and they never had a female or a Latina be the star. So there are lots of news and first times ever in that commercial. And again, it was a part of an important strategic priority to engage the audience, but to also talk about something which helped us open up that game. Flag football now is being sanctioned in high schools across America. There are over 20 pilots, and our goal is to have the sport sanctioned for girls in all 50 states, and we're making real progress, right? And so we know how big of an opportunity it is when we go into the Super Bowl, and obviously we have a program year round, but it's always something that is at the highest level of our priorities, and we know just how powerful it can be.
See, I get the idea, right? They're like, oh, well, you don't need to advertise. It's your own thing, and you've got 200 million people. But I like the idea, and I've had other conversations with the league before, even on this podcast, where there's always room for growth. It doesn't matter how big the ratings are. It doesn't matter how many people are paying attention. There are always specific markets, specific people, specific identifiers to grow the game. I mean, I would assume that is why the game is going to Brazil, it is going to other places. The locations in which you put games are a priority. And you can see that there's still, even if there are 200 million people watching, if you can expand globally, there are incredible opportunities for growth in that way. Like, I don't know the numbers of the amount of people who will watch the Cricket World Cup, but that's an insane number. Yeah. Whatever number we think domestically is large is pales in comparison to some kind of global numbers. Zach, when you're telling this story, right, and you know that it's long form, but you need to grab somebody's attention, right, and you've centered in on Ghana. How do you kind of figure out how you're going to wrap that story into the objectives and make it entertaining, inform, kind of, do all those things and pack it into that time frame? For
sure. I think that's the challenge. I mean, even if you look at this year's film, it was like a bit of a mini movie. We had all these, it was an entire story. And I think it's, again, about, we like to, one of the, I think the marquees of our best Super Bowl work is showing football show up in an unexpected way. We've done it in different ways.
Yes.
And we love the idea of going to the Makola market in Ghana. It was, this crazy big market, millions of people selling goods all day, and bringing the players there and having football play out was really special. And then to actually go there and shoot it, for 2 days in the market, not shutting down the market, us setting up production within the market, was really a once in a lifetime experience. And I think it hopefully reflected on the film of how special that was.
Zach and I and a few other, some of the creative guys and the production people, I think it was the day or the 2 days before the shoot started, we went up on this terrace and overlooked this market where we were going to shoot. I mean, it was just like amazing, like something you see out of a film or something. It was just, there are millions and millions of sort of human beings wandering in every direction and busy and riding bikes and, buses going through the crowds. It was just incredible. And we thought, holy shit, we're gonna film this right in the middle of all of that. Like, how this is gonna be incredible. We were so like, on the one hand, we were like, nervous and maybe a bit scared, but we were excited. Most of all, we were super enthusiastic and excited about getting out there. But I think the ambitions that we have had, if you think back to the first thing we did together was the 100th celebration, right? Where we had over 50 players, actually 65 players who were in that commercial, right? The NFL had never had more than a handful of players ever in a commercial. And we came on and we said, hey, yeah, we need some players. We need 65. And, it was just what a feat to do. And we only had a few weeks to do it, by the way. And so everything that we've done has been incredibly ambitious. And, not actually knowing whether we could pull it off or not, but knowing that we trust each other, knowing that the potential for something great that would really stand out and make a difference was there. And so we just decided, let's do it. And I think, honestly, after we got back from Africa, a lot of the people were being very open, saying like, I didn't know if we were actually going to go. Like there were people on the team who were like, I don't know if we're going to do this or not. And then at least in my mind, I don't know about you, Zach, but at least in my mind, like, no, we're going. We're definitely going.
Yes.
So, and I think that is one of the reasons, just being brave and being courageous and daring to do things that maybe seem impossible has been part of the magic that we have been creating together over time.
Well, I think it's helpful to tell people the timeline and the turnaround on this. But before I do that, Tim, when you're talking about, you're sitting there and you're looking at it and it seems like and feels like a movie, I'm like, that's good location scouting.
Yeah.
If it feels like that before you film, that is awesome. Yeah. Also, as somebody who has done a lot of experiential in my career, legitimately terrifying once you see that amount of traffic and you're like, oh, and now I have to do this. I've had to blow stuff up on a bridge, and while there's people just casually walking on it, I'm like, I'm going to scare the crap out of these people. I'm literally going to scare the crap out of these people. I can't tell them. Yep. I can't tell them this is terrible, something I would not do, obviously, in 2024, but I did in 2011. But, Zach, tell me a little bit about timeline and turnaround on this.
Sure. I mean, I think, Tim, when did we lock the idea? I'm trying to... In November?
I think it was sometime in October, late October.
Yeah. So we locked the idea in October.
And then you got player schedules and all these things to work around.
Oh, well, geez. Talk about player schedules, Zach.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Well, I think it's
so you...
Go ahead.
I was going to say that. So you have to... So, yeah. I'm trying to think about like who the talent can be, and you kind of have to know, well, who's going to be available, and you don't really in October.
Well, let me just tell you this. We didn't know our final players all the way up until the season was really over.
Yeah.
So we had some targets, and the tricky thing about this is that because when we were going to shoot, it couldn't be a player who was in the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you probably know, there were so many teams that could have made the playoffs all the way until the last week of the season.
Yeah.
So we had to identify players who, people would recognize. So we wanted like big marquee players who already were recognizable, like Justin Jefferson, for example, right? Saquon Barkley, amazing players. And so, and then the complication of like, they didn't want to have vaccinations until the season was over, right? Because that could like disturb their play or something. So, so it was important for us then to have to wait all the way till the end. So we had to time this thing to where we knew that they weren't going to make the playoffs. We could get them their vaccinations in time to actually get over to Africa and shoot it before the game, right? Because the turnaround time was incredible.
Yeah.
What am I forgetting, Zach? There's so many options.
Well, no, I think you nailed it. A month, but also I think players when they're done with the season want to go to a beach in Cancun, and not necessarily want to get on a flight to Ghana. And it's hard. It's a long flight. It's
hot.
And so hot. And I think kudos
You're
to
in full uniform.
Yeah. Kudos to Tim and his team's relationship with the players to be able to, they want to be able to be part of this. I think based on some of the work we've done in the past. Also kudos to the players that recognize the power of going to Ghana and showing up for the league and showing up for the country. I think it made an incredible difference. And I think hopefully will be a really great, supercharge the future of getting international talent in the league.
Working with players, there's some basic things that you really have to consider over time. One is that they don't want to work with you if you're not going to do great stuff, right? And I think, and I've heard this from players directly that they want to be in our work because they know it's going to be very creative and people are going to talk about it, right? So I've heard players describe it as every year, particularly in the Super Bowl, like the NFL is one of those advertisers that people are waiting to see what they're going to come up with this year, right? And so for a player to be in that, it's special. So that's one thing. The other thing is that they have to trust you, right? And there's always some level of tension between a league and a player, right? So, and that's one of the things that I personally really wanted to really focus on, is like, how do we earn their, their trust? How do we become truly partners and not have this just to be like a transactional thing? And I think that, yes, so Justin Jefferson, we've worked with him a lot. Saquon, we work with Saquon a lot. So there is a level of trust there that we're gonna make them look good. We're gonna take care of them, and it's gonna be something that we're all gonna be proud of at the end of the day. So I think, and that, I mean, and I think that ultimately that has allowed us to work. If you look around some of the other leagues, they don't get that kind of talent in their work, right? And I think that it's something that just takes time, and it takes true trust between the partners.
Yeah, like that first one, the 100 one, like that's got to be the toughest ask to get people into it. You would assume subsequently, but yeah, I was thinking about that from scheduling. Are you having, Tim, very specific question, are you having like soft conversations in October, November, December, or are you just waiting until January to ask?
No, we do. Yeah, we begin to talk about, well, which players make sense for this particular spot, right?
Gotcha.
And we begin to have, some of the players that we know really well. We begin to have, it's a good way to describe it, soft conversation. But then there's but I can't say yes until this date, or I can't really engage with you on this until we know for sure we're not in the playoffs, for example, which we get, right? Like we would never,
totally.
Obviously their core focus is always going to be on the game. So we're very respectful of that.
Well, and shout out to the Detroit Lions for helping Justin Jefferson make the shoot. But which was awesome. Zach, like, there's obviously a theme in, like, you mentioned, like, bringing football into, like, that is kind of like the through line of all these, right? That you're bringing football into a scenario from a storyboarding standpoint. So in October you're doing this. Did you have this kind of storyboarded before January?
Yeah. So we brought in, quickly once we aligned on the idea, we brought in, started looking at directors. It was important to have a West African director. So we got Andrew from Little Mason, Nigerian. He had shot in Ghana before. So just his local knowledge from everything from customs to the crew to everything was so invaluable. And then we started, trying to actually block out this shot, which is really hard to do. Once you need to kind of go walk the market. So we got there, I think we were there for 11 days. So we got there on a day that the market was shut down on a Sunday, and we were able to walk through it and kind of block off the action. We had our stunt peoples. Again, it's hard enough to find stunt doubles that look like football players in America. Harder in the continent of Africa. We got some Nigerian players that had been part of the OCU Manura camp that actually can do the football moves, because they're crashing into stuff, they're jumping on stuff. So, and then, we storyboarded everything out. And then also it's a live market. So sometimes the storyboards kind of get thrown out and you're like, holy shit, let's roll camera.
Well, and then also we set up all these stunts, and then sometimes players will say, yeah, I can do that. I know you want to do a stuntman on this one, but I can do that. I want to do it.
Yeah.
Or you get a situation where they're like, hey, I'm not diving over that table more than two times, because the chance that I might get hurt, increasingly higher every time. So, obviously you're never going to push a player to do anything that he's not comfortable with. And then, like, for example, Justin Jefferson, like, leaps, I don't know how many feet up in the air, maybe 6 feet up in the air. And, when we first looked at the scene, they had gotten like this little mattress, like a really bad, mattress for a bed. And we're like, whoa, no, this is not going to work. This guy's not going to jump 6 feet in the air and land on that, right? So then we're like, well, we want the guy to land on a bunch of fruit or whatever to make it, spectacular. So it's stuff like that. And I don't know, like at the last second, they figured out they got this mat that was big and thick enough, almost like these guys from the high jump, But like, we didn't know in Ghana, Africa, we didn't know if they could find that. And if they couldn't find it, we had to completely change a shot, because we weren't, obviously you're not going to take any chances that the player might get hurt. You don't want anybody to get hurt, but you have to be flexible in a situation like that. But listen, I could back up too, like, because you asked an interesting question, like, how much football and so forth. So on the one hand, you want to do something which is not just a predictable, expression of tackle football, right? On the other hand, you also don't want it to be void of the game. And I think we we went back and forth a lot between
Yeah.
my team and Zach and his guys of like, well, how much football should we have? And ultimately, for example, that whole market section was added, right, Zach?
Yeah.
Kind of later in the process because we realized that there just wasn't enough football in the spot. So we kind of like said, okay, well, a third of the spot's going to be the beginning to establish Kwesi and who he is and his family and that you're in Africa and so forth. And then you're going to have this middle section, which is all going to be the joy and the fun of the game. And we're going to do some crazy acrobatic things in the busiest market in Ghana. And then at the end, we're going to have this incredible moment where Kwesi goes out and realizes that there is football in Africa and that he has all these opportunities and that this very emotional scene. And basically we all agreed, like, okay, the goal here is to have people, get goosebumps and have people well up with tears when they see this scene. And sure enough, we were, the guys were able creatively to pull that off. So that evolution of how much football should be in the spot was a very healthy discussion between our teams.
I think it's the understanding, right, that you know your audience and that you need to tell a story.
Yeah.
Right? And you need to tell a powerful story that talks about all those objectives that we talked about in the first 4 minutes. And then you're adding that action part because the people that are watching, a lot of them would like to see that action that draws you in. It actually doesn't, the way you did it, it doesn't detract from the story. It's additive. Like they're little bits and pieces. The story keeps moving, but there are these things that you can kind of pick out and remember. If you recall the commercial for anybody who's, seen it, those might be the moments. Like you might remember the story, but you might remember specific action moments. Sure. That's all super important. There was a couple things that were, came to mind when you were talking about that. Mostly, and Tim, you alluded to it too. It's just the responsibility when you are the actual league, not a brand sponsor. You have a little bit more responsibility to make sure that you don't injure the player, but also then they are like, but I can do this. Yeah. So I'm sure that's a balance. But one of the things I love talking about in this context, even though a lot of the audience are brand professionals, creators, and they understand this, it's just all the logistics you have to think about, right? It's that little thing with the mattress, right? Or Zach, you were alluding to it too. You're there 11 days ahead of time. You have to walk through it. I strongly suggest do not try and use Google Maps.
No.
Do not try and use Google View. You actually have to be there to know things.
And we got the other thing was a stunt dog in Ghana. Yeah. And we had to find, kudos again to Little Mix production company, was able to find, I didn't know this, dogs have citizenship, a dog with dual citizenship. America is from Minnesota and Ghanaian, and they were able to bring it in. And then getting a stunt dog to catch a football in a market where there's thousands of people going about their day. Yeah. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Is there ever a moment?
The dog had to jump up just at the right time and get the ball and keep running. I mean, and it was a critical scene.
Yeah.
Right? It was not like an unimportant scene. It changes the whole arc of the story, right? Like they're playing football, and all of a sudden now he's chasing this dog all through Ghana, and the dog leads him to OC and to
that leads you to the end
program. Listen, if it
Zach, is there ever
sorry, Jeff, if it's not already clear, this whole focus of the spot is about our international pathway program for players, right? So we have academies, we have camps, we have all kinds of opportunities throughout the world, and increasingly we're putting focus on some sort of key parts of the world like Africa, where we're doing everything we possibly can to enable players if they want to play their dreams of playing American football, right? So it's simply about helping these players realize their dreams and giving them opportunity. Usually they come through the college system, of course, and then on to the pros. But like we had this last year, we had over 88 players who played in the game. So not just weren't on the team, but actually played in a game who were foreign born, right? So it's an incredible program and it's growing. And it's really exciting. So we had two of the players who were in our spot played pro and were from Nigeria, right? And it's funny because I've now listened to two different players get up and talk about this spot, and each of them said, I am Kwesi. And then the other one's like, no, I am Kwesi. Yeah. I don't know how many players think they're Kwesi, but it's really a kind of a beautiful thing to see because it really inspires these players and makes them really want to do everything they possibly can to realize their dreams.
Well, it's a great inspirational story, but it also ties into their thing, right? The more people are playing the game, the more they probably want to watch the game, right? So you're growing the game, you're doing something purposeful, but you're also serving the goals and objectives of the organization. Zach, the question I wanted to ask was very simply, do you ever just have a creative moment where you add something and then have the realization, oh crap, how do we actually make this happen?
All the time. I'm the producer's best friend and worst nightmare. And I think it's happens, all the. I mean, you write it because like I don't. When you're writing a project, writing something, we're just writing a story, and then how do we figure out, is the whole other thing. And again, kudos to our production team to actually bring this to life, and it's trying to bring magic to the screen. If you want people to say, how did they do that,
Well, let me.
Was there anything so absurd that it got cut?
Sorry. I mean, here's the thing. I was just going to say that, Jeff. So, like, on the one hand, Zach's right. They're really, really good at coming up with things that are incredibly difficult to pull off. Personally, I get excited about that stuff because I'm like, oh, this sounds great. Like, how can we figure this out?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what's harder. What's harder is that when you come up with a lot of great stuff and a lot of great scenes, and even though you do your animatics and all that, and it seemed like this is all going to fit. This is going to be great. And then you realize, no. First of all, it's not going to fit in an edit because this stuff takes too long to do that we thought was going to be shorter. And then second of all, even though we were there 11 days, we still didn't have time to do everything we wanted to do, right? So I think what's most difficult is when you have two, like, really partners who are incredibly ambitious and they want to do so much, and then you have to, like, make this Sophie's choice of, like, all right, we're not going to do this. We're just going to have to focus on the things that are most important for this production and do that. And we're going to have to, completely cut this other scene or whatever. And you know how the dynamics work on set. Like, you might have a director or you might have whoever who really wants to do that. And so the whole thing becomes very challenging and often very emotional of like, okay, how are we going to solve this problem together? What are we going to do? How are we going to cut this off? How are we going to get this in the amount of time that we have? Because I know we all wanted to get 20 shots in one day, but we're not going to be able to. So we're going to have to make a decision. And it's hard, man, particularly when you're in a foreign country, what the stakes are so high to pull this thing off. You don't really know exactly how it's going to play without a shot. So it's always a difficult decision to make. But I think that's one of the things that, again, the partnership, right? The trust and so forth.
Yeah.
It's one of the things between the NFL and 72andSunny that has allowed us to do the kind of work that we do, because ultimately we do have this trust in each other and we hold ourselves accountable. At the end of the day, we both hold ourselves accountable.
Tim, you made my segue for me.
Yeah.
That was perfect, because that was my last question. Zach, then Tim. When you have a partnership that builds like this, you're in. Obviously, there's the obvious why that's helpful, but just talk to me about why that's important, how that, what you can do after 6 years of doing this versus what you couldn't do.
I think we have a lot of honest conversations. And I think it's Tim and I talk all the time. We text all the time, and it's always just continually to be inspired. And I think keep pushing things. I think we push each other in the best ways. Example, the first Super Bowl spot I did with them was this kid Bunchy running across the country. And I was like, he's going to run onto the field and deliver a game ball to the referee in front of 100 million people. And Tim's like, I love it. We're going to add 32 people to also kids to run on the field, one from every team. We're going to hold a contest. And so now it's not just about worrying about one kid performing in front of 100 million people, 32 other kids who have no experience and are going to run out there. And it's that kind of push and pull that I think really makes the work great.
Yeah, and I think, Zach's so right that the sort of the constant dialogue and the sort of like a common vision on what you're trying to achieve. And you can achieve things in a variety of ways creatively, but you sort of like, you're very focused on what's the big picture here. We continue to sort of open up the game. We continue to focus on youth and youth culture. We continue to focus on females and Latinos to like make them feel that they're part of this game and they can legitimately grow the game with us. And I think because of that focus, we just find different ways to express it, I think, in very big emotional and inspiring ways. And then I think we also have the courage to sort of say, all right, you know what, let's kill this and let's do something different. Like I gotta tell you, the last 2 Super Bowls,
That's important.
they what we produced was not where we started, right? We both had other, they were big ideas, by the way.
Yeah.
We both had other big ideas, and ultimately fairly far along in the process, because we usually start in the summer. So fairly far along in the process, we cut the idea and said, you know, we're not going to do this. It's not going to turn out to be what we thought it was going to be. So let's focus on this other idea because we think that can be even better. And that is not an easy thing to do, right? You talk about, okay, now you have a lot less time. You know, you basically, putting yourself in a much more difficult position. But because we sort of like trust each other and because we know what we can pull off or not pull off, we have made some pretty dramatic moves at very late stages, simply because, you know, when you develop an idea, it either gets better or it gets worse. That's really it. It's either through working with an idea, it's either you're gonna get more excited about it, or you're gonna start feeling like, ugh, this is not going where I thought it was gonna go. This is starting to get like actually less exciting than where it started on paper. And so you have to be able to like have the courage to say, we're not going to do this. We're going to put this aside. We're going to completely change our focus and do something different. And I think you don't do that unless you have a very strong partnership and a high level of trust between each other. And I think ultimately some of the best work that we've done has come from us doing that. So just decide like, let's just go for it, right? Let's just switch direction and do this. I think we can do it.
It's the most football thing. You got to call into audible sometimes.
I like when we stick the landing. That is the perfect way to end it because that is the best takeaway, right? If you that's the best benefit of a long-term relationship with a partner is knowing that you can execute things and have the confidence both on the brand side and on the agency side to say, I don't think this is going to cut it. Zach, Tim, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Really appreciate it. Later.